The click of the lock was louder than it should have been. My chest tightened, my pulse quickened. He turned toward me slowly, his gaze holding something I couldn't name, something dangerous, something magnetic. "Now we're alone," he said, his voice quiet but heavy. My throat went dry. It was supposed to be nothing, just another night, just another visit. But in that moment, I knew whatever was about to happen would change everything. And part of me didn't want to stop it. It was the middle of summer when I first came back home for the break. College had drained me, late nights, deadlines, and a gnawing loneliness that followed me everywhere. Coming back to my hometown felt like a kind of relief, though I wasn't sure if it was the place itself or the people I had left behind. He was one of those people, my ex's brother. It sounds strange when I say it like that, as if the label defines everything about him. But back then, he wasn't my ex's brother in my head. He was just Daniel, who lived in the house I had visited countless times, who used to roll his eyes when his brother and I argued, who sometimes made dry jokes that no one but me seemed to catch. When my ex and I broke up, I thought that part of my life was over. I wasn't supposed to run into Daniel again. Yet here I was, back in the same town, running into him at the corner cafe as though the universe wanted to play tricks on me. "Back for the summer?" he had asked casually, a small smirk tugging at his lips. I nodded, awkward at first. "Yeah, you?" "Always here," he shrugged, his dark hair falling into his eyes for a moment. He looked older than the last time I saw him, more grounded. There was something in the way he carried himself now, still laid back, but with an edge that hadn't been there before. We ended up sitting down together that day, talking longer than I had planned. About the town, about my college life, about how little had changed here, and how much had changed in me. There was no mention of his brother, no mention of what connected us in the first place. And strangely, that silence made things easier. The next few weeks, I saw more of him. Sometimes at the cafe, sometimes on the street, sometimes when he'd wave me over from across the park where he liked to run in the evenings. It always started casually, harmless conversations, catching up like acquaintances who were never really close. But under the surface, I began to feel something different brewing. There were small moments I couldn't ignore. The way he leaned in when he spoke, lowering his voice like he didn't want anyone else to hear. The way his hand brushed against mine when he passed me something across the table, neither of us pulling away quickly enough. The way his eyes lingered on me just a second too long, as though he was thinking things he couldn't say out loud. I told myself I was imagining it, that it was nothing, that the heat of the summer was making me see signals where there were none. But my body betrayed me, my stomach tightening when he smiled, my breath catching when his shoulder brushed mine. One evening, he invited me over, not to his house. Thankfully, that might have been too much, but to a quiet spot by the lake. "It's better at night," he said, bringing a couple of beers and tossing one to me as we sat by the water. The moonlight reflected off the lake, casting a silver glow on everything. For a while we didn't talk, just sat in silence, listening to the water lapping at the shore. When he finally spoke, it wasn't about anything heavy, just a story about work, about how boring things could get in a small town. But while he spoke, I noticed his hand resting on the ground, close enough to mine that the warmth radiated between us. I should have moved. I didn't. Instead, I let the moment hang there, heavy and unspoken, like a secret waiting to burst. That was when I realized something had shifted. It wasn't just casual anymore. It wasn't just coincidence. Something was building, something I wasn't ready to name, but couldn't ignore any longer. And when he turned to me, his eyes catching mine in the dim glow of the moon, I knew that sooner or later a line would be crossed. The strange thing about tension is that it creeps in slowly, like water seeping through cracks. At first you don't notice it. Then, before you know it, the air feels heavier every time you're around them. That's what it was like with Daniel. At the cafe, I caught myself watching him stir his coffee absent-mindedly, his fingers tapping the ceramic mug like he was thinking of something else. When he looked up, our eyes locked, longer than they should have. Neither of us smiled, neither of us looked away right away. It was as if the silence between us carried a conversation. We weren't brave enough to speak aloud. I told myself it was just curiosity. That's what I kept repeating whenever I noticed the way his gaze lingered. But the excuse wore thin the night we sat together by the lake again. It started harmlessly, like before, a couple of beers, casual conversation. But somewhere in the middle of him telling a story about high school football, his voice trailed off. His eyes flickered to me, then down to my hand resting beside his. I could almost feel the unspoken thought between us. Should I? The night was quiet, no one around. Still, the weight of it made my heart pound in my ears. I shifted slightly, not pulling away, but not leaning closer either. The indecision was suffocating. Why are you looking at me like that? I finally asked, my voice low, almost breaking the spell. Daniel smirked faintly, but didn't answer. Instead, he tipped his bottle to his lips and leaned back, leaving the words unspoken. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying it. The stare, the silence, the feeling that something nearly happened. The days after, it only got worse. He came by my house one afternoon, saying he needed help fixing his car. I followed him out, squinting in the hot sun as he popped the hood. The smell of oil and heat mixed in the air. Hold this, he said, handing me a wrench. His hand brushed mine as he passed it over. It wasn't accidental. I could tell. My chest tightened. The heat wasn't just from the sun. You're quiet, he said after a while, wiping his hands on a rag. I'm thinking. About what? I hesitated, staring down at the tool in my hand. About how weird this is. Weird? He asked, stepping closer. Yeah, us. For a second, I thought he might laugh. Instead, his expression softened, almost serious. Does it have to be weird? I swallowed hard, the question hitting deeper than I expected. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Just then, my mom stepped outside to ask if we wanted lemonade. The spell broke instantly. I nearly jumped, shoving the wrench back into his hand, putting space between us as though I'd been caught. She didn't notice, of course. She was too busy fussing with the tray. But I felt exposed, raw, like someone had almost seen something I wasn't ready to admit. That night, he texted me. Just one line. You don't have to be afraid of me. I stared at it for a long time, not sure if my heart was racing with relief or dread. A week later, it happened. We were at his place. Not his parents' house, but the small apartment he had rented in town. I wasn't supposed to be there. Not really. I told myself I was just dropping off the book he had asked for. But when he opened the door and said, "Stay a while," I didn't resist. We sat on the couch, a movie playing in the background that neither of us paid attention to. The room felt too small, the air too thick. My pulse quickened every time his arm brushed against mine. At one point, I shifted to grab my drink, and his hand grazed my thigh. Not forceful, not deliberate, but not exactly accidental either. I froze. He didn't move his hand right away. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice barely audible. He looked at me then, eyes burning with something unspoken. For a second, I thought he was going to lean in, and my body screamed both yes and no at the same time. The thrill of it sent heat rushing through me, but so did the shame. "We shouldn't," I murmured, though I didn't move away. "I know," he said quietly. His hand pressed down slightly, the faintest pressure like a test. "But do you want it to stop?" My throat went dry. My mind screamed yes. My body said no. And then the sound of footsteps in the hallway made us spring apart. His roommate. The front door opened, keys jangling, laughter spilling in from outside. My heart nearly exploded from the shock of being discovered, though the guy barely glanced at us before heading to his room. Still, the danger of it left me shaken. The realization that we could have been seen, exposed, left me breathless. When the door closed again, Daniel let out a soft laugh, trying to play it off. Close call. But I couldn't laugh. My chest was too tight, my body still trembling from the almost touch. I stood up too quickly. I should go. He didn't stop me, but his eyes followed me all the way to the door. That night, lying in my bed, I felt torn apart inside. The shame burned me. What would people say if they knew? What would his brother think? What would I think of myself if I let it happen? And yet, underneath all the fear, there was another truth, one I couldn't ignore no matter how much I tried. I wanted him. The long stares, the quiet silences, the almost touch, they weren't accidents. They were building towards something neither of us could stop. And the scariest part was that I didn't want to stop it anymore. The night it happened, the world outside seemed too quiet, like it was waiting for us to do something we couldn't take back. I was half asleep when I heard the knock on my door. 3 soft raps. Hesitant, I sat up, heart racing, already knowing who it was. Yeah. My voice cracked from sleep. The door opened a fraction, then wider. Daniel stood there in the dark hallway, his face lit faintly by the glow of the street lamp outside. He didn't say anything at first. He just looked at me. What are you doing here? I whispered, though my chest already knew the answer. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. The click of the lock echoed louder than it should have. Now we're alone, he said quietly. I swallowed hard. You shouldn't. I know. His voice was firm but soft. But I had to. The silence stretched. The air grew heavy. He walked closer, his steps deliberate, until he was standing right by my bed. I could smell him. Faint cologne, faint beer warmth. Daniel. I started, but the word broke apart. He sat down on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under his weight. For a moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was my breath, shallow and uneven. You've been thinking about it too, he whispered. I froze. About what? His eyes held mine. This. He leaned closer, not quite touching, just close enough that I could feel the heat of him. My body screamed with both fear and wanting. I shook my head, but it was weak, unconvincing. This is wrong. Maybe, he said. His voice was steady, like he had already made peace with the danger of it. But I can't stop. His hand brushed mine, a simple touch, but it sent electricity rushing through me. Don't, I whispered. Do you want me to stop? His question hung in the air like a knife. I couldn't answer. My silence was its own confession. He moved closer. His forehead touched mine. His breath was warm, shaky. I could hear the pounding of his heart, like it was my own. This is crazy, I whispered. Then let's be crazy. And before I could talk myself out of it, his lips pressed against mine. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't careful. It was desperate, full of everything we had been holding back for weeks. My hands trembled as I grabbed the back of his shirt, pulling him closer, terrified and exhilarated all at once. When he pulled away, just a fraction, his eyes searched mine in the dark. Say it, he whispered. Say what? That you want me. The words lodged in my throat. Saying them would make it real. Saying them would destroy the walls I'd been hiding behind. My voice broke. I can't. He leaned in again, brushing his lips against my jaw, his breath shaking. You already did. The weight of it crushed me and lifted me at the same time. My chest hurt, my body ached. I wanted him more than I had ever wanted anything, and the shame of it burned just as hot. What if someone finds out? I asked, barely breathing. They won't. His voice was almost a plea. I won't let them. I pressed my face against his shoulder, as if hiding could erase the truth. My hands clutched him tighter. I'm scared, I admitted. I know. His hand moved through my hair, slow, gentle, grounding. Me too. The room was dark, silent, but inside me everything was loud. Guilt, thrill, confusion, desire. He kissed me again, slower this time, softer, as if he wanted to prove it wasn't just hunger, as if he wanted to show me it could also be care. I let him. For a while, nothing else existed. Not his brother, not the fear of being caught, not the weight of what tomorrow would bring. Only this moment, his hands, his breath, his heart beating against mine. When we finally pulled apart, we sat there in silence, our foreheads still touching, breaths mingling in the darkness. What happens now? I whispered. He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. I don't know. The honesty in his voice cut deeper than anything else. He didn't pretend. He didn't promise. He just held me like the world was crumbling, and we only had tonight. For the first time, I didn't push him away. I let myself want him, even if it ruined everything. The morning after, the air felt different. He didn't knock again. He didn't need to. We both knew what we had done, and neither of us had the courage to say it out loud. When I saw him at breakfast, his eyes avoided mine, but his hand shook when he lifted his coffee. I wanted to speak, to laugh it off, to pretend it never happened, but the weight between us was too heavy. We didn't talk about that night. Not once. He went back to being my ex's brother, and I went back to pretending I was fine. But I wasn't, because every time I closed my eyes, I felt his breath, his hands, the desperate honesty in his kiss. Some things can be hidden, others can't. This, him, will stay with me forever, whether I want it to or not. One word, how did this story make you feel? Heartbroken, exposed, confused, or maybe something else? Drop it in the comments below. And if you've ever been in a situation like this, where silence spoke louder than words, share your story too.